Welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf. I'm Samia Aziz, celebrating the power of literature and the voices of authors and changemakers from the global majority. Join me as we explore the stories that inspire, connect, and transform our world. Let's uncover the stories that truly matter together. Today I'm joined by Ova Ceren, whose debut novel, The Book of Heartbreak, is a raw, tender, and compelling exploration of love, loss, and healing amid a fantasy world of angels and the other side. With lyrical prose and unflinching honesty, Ova takes readers on a journey through the intensity of different types of love and loss, while also throwing us into a family of secrets, unspoken histories, and a journey of self discovery. In our conversation, we talk about what inspired her to write such a story, moving into writing from being a software engineer, the fantasy genre, heartbreak, Turkey and Turkish history, and so much more. I'm so glad Ova's my guest today. Hello, Ova. Welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf. It's so wonderful to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Hi, it is wonderful to be here as well. I'm good, but I'm also a little bit manic because tomorrow is my publish date.
This is so exciting. And of course, your debut novel is called The Book of Heartbreak and it is out on the 26th of August. And it's very exciting. It is a very interesting, I feel like it kind of sits in like a cross of genres. Like it's fantasy and we've got a love story in there, but we've got family drama, we've got secrets, we've got almost a little bit of a coming of age happening there at the same
Yeah,
time. Lots of different types of love and loss, but also a really fantastical world of angels and the other side, if you like. It's
yeah.
just very, very interesting overall. But before we get into talking about the book itself, I want to talk a little bit about your journey into writing. So I know that you have not always been an author. This is your debut, so your first novel, and actually you're from the field of engineering, if I'm not mistaken. So
I'm
tell
a
me a
software
little bit
developer.
about tell me a little bit about your move from one field to another.
Of course. So I moved to the UK 14 years ago. I'm a software engineer, software developer. Every job title calls it something different. Um, and the reason I moved from Turkey to the UK because I wasn't really in love with my job, let's say, and
Mm.
I knew there would be better work but life balance here. So I wouldn't be like working all day, like until 9 p.m. or something. And when I moved, it was great for a while because there's a range of jobs here. I moved between jobs a lot because I found like when I moved between jobs, there was like breaking the routine, going to some place. It was kind of preventing me to get bored, I guess. So I was taking like the 6 months projects. But after a while, especially after I had my child, and maybe it was hormones, I don't know. I felt like um, I think that was when I first went to my first ever creative writing course. Like it was in a community center. It was like
Mm.
a evening class. And don't get me wrong, like I've been always writing. Like I always wrote poetry and short stories. Um, and then I always written a blog first in Turkish and then in English. And then somewhere there I also had early menopause, and it just like everything just came together. Like after I was diagnosed with premature ovarian failure, basically my ovaries weren't working anymore, and I think that was like when my son was 3 years old or 2 years
Mm.
old. I can't quite remember right now. And then I was really depressed at that time,
Mm.
and then I started an Instagram account. my
Mm.
Instagram account. And I started posting there. I was like taking photos of the books, reviewing books. And then that account started growing as well.
Mm.
Um, and people, I was writing like like little micro blogging there, and people were telling me, "Oh my God, you should write a book." And like those all run parallel, and I started thinking maybe I should write a book. And then um and then I just tried like twice, and my books died in the query trenches. I couldn't find an agent. And I wasn't sure about the third time because I was working full time as a software engineer. I had a young child. I didn't have the energy, but I guess I was very lucky in the sense that people around me was very supportive. My husband, for instance, he said to me like, "I believe you can do this."
Oh.
And I had a friend, Mena, who kind of told me that you are really good. It would be a tragedy if you don't pursue writing and you just keep writing software. I never forget how she said that. And then with my first two books, I kind of got feedback from agents. Like it wasn't like radio silence, and I got feedback from some top agents, and they liked it, but it wasn't quite there. You know,
Mm.
and I thought maybe I should go to a course like a bigger and more structured. So I went one of the really famous writing courses, and with and I went to that course just to kind of hold on to it, because you know how you go to gym,
Mm.
you pay gym and then you expect to go and be disciplined. So that was the same. I paid this course an enormous amount of money and hoped that will discipline me to write, because I'm gonna be honest, like it is hard, when you keep getting rejected.
Yeah.
um so I went to this course every Wednesday evening to London, and I was thinking, am I crazy? Is this gonna work? So and then after that course, my agent scooped me from that course.
Mm.
I didn't query my third book. I was really lucky. She kind of um, signed me before the book was finished. She really wanted it. Um, and then it just took from there. I never planned. I didn't have this childhood dream of being a writer, because I grew up in Turkey, and everyone expected me to have like this successful job, well-paying job. It was just like a dream I couldn't afford. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
people say it was my childhood dream. I think it was my secret, hidden dream. I was never be able to confess to myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But it's a huge transition, a huge decision. And it sounds like it wasn't one that came quickly or
No.
easily either. And I know that along the way you've made so many decisions about what like previously as well, like what jobs to take, what jobs not to take, where to live, and I guess every decision has ultimately led you to the publication of your
Yes.
debut, and hopefully more to come in the future, but we'll have to see what happens. But
Yes.
yeah, and I guess also a reminder that, like, if you are in one sector or one profession, it's never it's never too late, or it's never
No, it's not.
impossible to change if writing is something that you want to pursue.
Exactly. Like, think about me. I was just like an immigrant here. I don't even own this language. It's secondhand on me. You can't
Mm,
tell from my speaking. And most days I was thinking, am I crazy? Will I be able to do that? But like, if there's someone out there thinking the same, I think it just takes a lot of perseverance and a lot of sacrifices. Like, for example, I basically gave up my social life. I lost a lot of friends. I used to go out every Wednesday as a family, meet with friends, do this or
mm,
that. And w- while I pursued writing the Book of Heartbreak and working with my agent to like perfect it, to kind of send it to submission, I committed so much to writing and the book. I had no time for seeing people, going out. It was just writing. My life was
Mm,
writing, and it was a big sacrifice. And I'm so glad it worked out because, like, it is hard. I don't know, if I don't think I could ever leave writing.
mm,
I could ever not write
mm.
because all my life, when I looked back all my life, I could see that I was always writing something like
Yeah.
I have hundreds of short stories which I'm using as novel ideas right now. Um, but I think it would be very difficult for me to pursue maybe traditional publishing because I think it is just too competitive, and as a um, I think that's the beauty of our time right now. Like, if
Mm.
something is not working, you can always try publishing it yourself. You know what I mean? I think there's always like options there right now. I think it
Yeah.
was more shunned in the past, but right now we all know how successful some self-published books can be right now, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's so many ways to do what you love and what you want to do,
Exactly.
in this day and age, which is really exciting, I think, and really, um, I think it just creates space for so many more people because we know that publishing, is quite limited and it can be quite difficult to make a name for yourself and to get yourself out there in the industry, even though there are thousands and thousands of books being published in the UK every week. And I guess that makes it hard as well to stand out from the crowd. Um,
True.
but you've spoken about English being your second language or not your first language, and I wondered what it was like for, because obviously, like, anybody can learn a language and become fluent in a language, but I feel like writing a novel is just such a like a mammoth task. I wonder how you sort of straddled that, writing in this language that obviously you're, like, completely fluent in and very confident in. I'm not at all talking about ability or capability. I guess it's more about what you're most comfortable in and what comes more easily to you, and also the differences because Turkish is a much more vast language than English, when it comes to vocabulary, but when it comes to things like sentence structure, but also in terms of how, like, poetic it is also. So what was some of that like for you?
Yes, sure. That's a great question, actually. So, writing a novel, in terms of like, I think I have a natural ability to plot because I've been always like a plotter, thinking
Mm.
about, and my friends always come to me as for the plot help, like when they're stuck. So that I'm kind of like the go-to person for plot in my writing friends. But in terms of actual writing, um, my first book, while I was writing my first book, I had a friend who edited it for me, like line edit with grammar and stuff. And
Mm,
while I was working with her, it was a huge learning task. Like I could see the patterns, why I was not why what I wasn't quite doing right.
mm,
And like that editing of the first book with her, because she was like sending me this track changes document, I was like, oh yeah, that is what I'm doing wrong. I could see like my patterns of failing
mm,
grammar. So that teach me a lot. And but the thing is, I've been reading in majorly in English since my early 20s. I've been reading English since like maybe like 20 years.
mm,
So I'm like, I'm used to the rhythm of the language. I know, like, I don't know how it works. I cannot write in Turkish. I can't write in Turkish. Like the rhythm of the Turkish words,
mm,
it just doesn't. I don't know how, but it just doesn't work the same. Um, Maybe because I don't read in Turkish. That's the problem.
mm.
I don't know. Um, and I've been in an English teaching school since age 12 in Turkey, I mean.
Yeah.
Um, so like I've always mostly read in English, even for like the lessons. Um, So I'm thinking maybe that's why I was more open to writing in English, but it wasn't easy, especially my vocabulary will never be as good as a native English person's, I think. It's getting better, but like I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I spent like 15 to 20 minutes just on a sentence because I my instinct tells me this is not the right word to use, or like you can't
Mm.
use that more elegant word here, because some verbs, especially with verbs, I don't have problem with adjectives or you know but the verbs are my
Mhm.
like, I just, because some verbs have more in them than
Mm.
the simpler ones, so I'm always like hunting that the verb that has more in them. So I'm like thesaurus, all that. And one funny thing about it, I sometimes don't know how to pronounce the words I write.
Yeah.
And that was something that really depressed me when I was writing without a publisher, because I was telling myself, you can't even say this word, so how are you writing this? How dare you write it? You can't even say it. So that was one of the things that put me off a lot, and it still happens. I was like, for example, I have the word halo in the book, but I
Mm.
just didn't know how to say it. I was saying hello, and it's not hello, it's halo. So I've actually learned that very recently. But I guess it's not a word you use in day life,
Exactly. Yeah.
so
Exactly.
I didn't know. And I mean, every time but I think also not being native brings a flavor as well.
Mm.
You sometimes think in a way that maybe a native person wouldn't think.
Yeah.
I think that it can be a weakness, but also it is a strength at times as well.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's been a battle,
Mm.
um, but and a huge learning curve, huge learning. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the pronunciation thing is more more commonly experienced than you might think, even among, I guess, like native speakers, because the English language is so strange. I mean, there are like language rules, but then there are so many words that don't fit in within the rules, and there's one rule for one word and then another rule for another word, even though it looks the same and it should follow the same pattern. Like, it's very strange. There are often words that I have no idea how to pronounce them. Very simple words, also, like not just complicated words. Um, so I think that's a very common, very common experience. But I can completely understand how that might feel, or how that experience might be louder, I guess, if English is not your native language. Because I mean, I feel like that about any other language that is not English. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing things correctly just by looking at them. So I completely understand. But I also really liked how you ended that by saying that not being a native English speaker can bring a different perspective, and it has strengths to it as well as potential weaknesses. I don't really think there's a weakness at all, but I think you're so right in that y- coming from a different background, but also being able to speak a different language, I think really just enriches you as a person of language, a person that understands words, and a person that is interested in story. I think having different languages is just so enriching and fulfilling.
Yes, and I'm gonna like this is gonna sound really weird, and I don't know how to explain it, but also writing software,
Hmm.
honestly, I know code and fiction is completely different,
Yeah.
but in a way, there are patterns in fiction.
Yeah.
I'm not calling it an algorithm, but
Mm.
sometimes I think maybe also writing code also helped, because you kind of there is a flow to it, and
Mm.
it has to be following certain, I'm not gonna say patterns, but it is also strangely feels like patterns, like for example, you can't have like a dialogue going, maybe you can, but like it is a bit weird if you have like dialogue going on pages and pages and pages. So it
Mm.
has to be like um So sometimes I feel like maybe also writing code in a way helped me to write fiction, if you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
there's a strange similarity between them in places.
Yeah, and I mean that's a very poetic. I think really there's something very beautiful in that because I guess writing code is also taking a different language and creating something in and of itself that is now separate from you and separate also from almost from the language itself. It's become this whole new thing, much like a novel, right? Like you've written it using the English language, but now this book. It has its own identity. It's going to have its own trajectory, and I think that art of it's that art of creation, coming from a form of language because software is or code rather is I guess language, and it has rules and it has
In languages, yes, absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. Um, But you obviously have set this book in Istanbul, in
Yeah.
modern day Istanbul, in Turkey, and it is inspired, I guess, by Turkish folklore or myths or stories or
Yeah.
history and heritage. Um, I'm really interested in how your Turkish identity seeps through into your writing, and what are you, I guess, interested in bringing out about your Turkish identity, but also maybe just Turkey in general?
Yes, that's a great question. Um, it is actually so in my book, the heroine is 17 years old. She's 5 months to 18, and she dies from heartbreak. So every time her heart breaks, she drops dead. And she's been given these five chances to stay alive, and she has only one chance left. She's being resurrected by this fairy godmother like creature from the other side, and she moves to Istanbul in the beginning of the book. Um, and I guess like one part of the book that I feel like that came from my own battles with Turkey is the Book of Heartbreak itself, because it's a book within the book written by this Ottoman scholar,
Mm.
and he has great advice. Like he gives advice in the beginning of every chapter, and um, so Turkey and I have a really turbulent relationship because I love it. I think it's a lonely and beautiful country. Once upon a time, as a award-winning director described in Cannes, France, the movie festival.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also I feel like growing up, it gave me so much pain as well, if you know what I mean. And in a way, I know it's very strange, but I moved like I don't think I could ever be a writer if I stayed in Turkey. I don't think Turkey would have given me the chance because it only wanted me to work, and you belong in this box and you must stay in this box, and then you must please the people around you. So that kind of was the mentality I had there. And I think I could just I kind of mirrored that into this book in a way that um I think I used the Book of Heartbreak itself to kind of criticize, I guess. I don't know how to explain it, and it's a very sensitive thing for me to speak, because I'm not quite sure how am I feeling about it as well as I'm speaking about it. But obviously I am Turkish and I'm very proud to be Turkish. Um, but so I guess maybe I'm not gonna lie, a part of it is maybe a bit westernized for the
Mm.
Western reader's eyes, because obviously the way I see Turkey and a British person or an American person sees Turkey is different. And
Mhm.
I kind of try to make it more appealing a bit for the Western eye. I'm not gonna lie,
Mm.
I think that is also the truth, because it's really beautiful. It carries layers and layers of history. And one thing that really affects me, and that's why I put the Byzantine myth in the heart of this book, is just the history forgets you. Like, nobody knows Byzantines, right?
Mm,
Everybody knows the Roman Empire, but no one knows Byzantines. They are all
mm,
forgotten because they Ottomans defeated them, so they are like gone. Nobody remembers them. But the Ottomans, kind of somehow this myth of the Maiden's Tower survived to this day, and that blows my mind because you know they are gone. Byzantines. Nobody takes their flag anymore. Nobody,
mm,
like with the Roman Empire it's different, everybody remembers the Roman Empire, but I don't know, because Byzantines were defeated by a Muslim opponent. I don't know, because
mm,
like I feel like the
mm,
history didn't forgive them for being defeated. And now they're folklore, because when I was writing this book, I was thinking, obviously there's Turkish, so much Turkey and Turkishness in my book, but I was
mm,
asking myself the question, is Byzantine folklore now Turkish folklore? Or is it Istanbul
mm,
folklore? It is definitely Istanbul folklore, because the tower is there. I mean, the myth is there linked to the tower. But is it like, were those people Turks? Like, were Ottomans Turks? Like, even the Ottomans, they weren't Turks. I mean, Turks. The word Turkish was an insult sometimes in Ottoman times, and it's like it's really strange. Like, I think writing this book made me realize, looking back in history of my country, how many layers existed and how these layers were supposed to hate each other, but they were
mm.
also so interlinked, like, and it made me ask me question, like, what am I, like,
Mm.
what does it mean to be Turkish, really? Like, because it's such a young country, you have the enormous Ottoman Empire before you, and then there's the Byzantines, obviously. And it's like, I don't know, it just made me feel a lot of like lost, I guess.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, they're so amazing, but it sounds also very um, complex and difficult, I guess, to really try to
Yeah,
understand your identity and who you are and how that fits into a wider picture and how that fits into history. When I think as well, like history has been molded and rewritten and like told from certain perspectives and in certain ways that
exactly.
have impacted, I guess, the way that we relate to who we are and the way that we understand not just who we are, but our place in the world as people from different nations. And
Exactly.
that's really, yeah, really fascinating.
It is fascinating, and also like maybe part of it is because, for example, my own family, like, obviously I'm Turkish, but my own family has Kurdish and Armenian
Mm,
heritage. When I look at my husband's family, they have Greek
mm,
heritage. I think there's so many layers there, and sometimes people want to ignore that. I can see, like, when I speak with Turkish people,
mm.
especially, like, and that is, I think that is something I should be able to face with, and be proud of, because that's how that's the way it is. And I try to kind of um I kind of try to sprinkle this into this book, like, because looking at the past is not
Yeah,
easy, especially if it will show you the things you don't want to
yeah,
see. Like, my character kind of looks to the past, and she finds really unpleasant things, but she also kind of has the strength to accept them, and move on and make herself stronger with this facts. And I guess in a way, this mirrors me and my mom as well,
yeah.
because when we looked at the past, my mom was relentlessly searching for some information about um, her grandmother,
Mm,
and then she found out that she was Armenian and her family was killed. She was orphaned, and she was given to this Kurdish couple. It was just like such a tragedy. And this is maybe this is obviously the in the book there's another entirely different story. This is nothing to do with my mom's or her grandmother's story, but it is in a way similar because I think the past, many, like the past can be full of
Yes.
traumas, you
Yes.
know. And I that's why I kind of made this book a little bit of a little bit of
Yeah.
traumatic. I don't know, because it is a part of being Turkish,
Yeah.
you know. You have to, you have a complicated past, like the complicated past comes with the Turkish
Yeah.
package, so it had to be in this book,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And so in this book, we meet 17-year-old Sarah, who
Yeah,
is who at the beginning faces a major tragedy in her life. I mean, I think it's we can say without giving away
yeah,
spoiler, but her mother passes away, and it's so um devastating because I mean that's how the book opens. It's just very sad. Um and that sort of spirals for her, like massive change in her life, and she moves to Istanbul to live with her grandfather, and she becomes absolutely adamant to understand her family history in order to understand this curse, which is related to the sort of the heartbreaks that you've described just a few minutes ago. um and it's fascinating. I really love reading about sort of people uncovering family secrets because I find it so relatable, I guess, and just really the most sort of real, I think, sort of exploration and understanding who you are and where you're coming from. And we see throughout the book this like very strained relationship that she has with her mother. And there's she's got good memories, but she's got lots of really bad memories. And as she learns more about what's happened, that also changes her perception of her mother. And I feel like that's such an important part of this book, this mother-daughter relationship. And what were you really trying to bring out? Like, what for you was at the crux of this relationship with Sarah and her mum?
um interesting question. So I actually never thought about that. I'm gonna be
Mm,
honest, because I was trying to make her like I was trying to make Sarah's life really difficult because the more problems you give to your heroine, it would be more interesting. The book will be more
yeah.
interesting. Um, but I think I wanted her like the most important thing I wanted to do with Sarah is I wanted her to be um, really, really
Mm,
isolated. I think in a way it was kind of like after I had my baby in the UK, that was like the most difficult few years of my life because I was alone here. You know, I felt so isolated and lonely because obviously I had British friends, but the way they mothered was so different than mine
mm,
and my culture. Um, and I've never felt lonelier in my life, so that was like kind of my, I think that's where Sarah's isolation comes from. And I think her mother is like, when I looked at her relationship with her mother, it had to be adding up to that isolation, so she couldn't be too close to her
mm,
mother. So that and then I had to make her mom uninterested,
mm,
not neglecting in a way, because I think Sarah is too good to ignore her mom.
mm,
She just doesn't have that. Um, so, and like, obviously, I can say maybe it's not a spoiler. Um, so Daphne, Sarah's mom, is an alcoholic in a way, and that for example came from my own family. My mom isn't an alcoholic, but I have so many, I have like three alcoholics in my family, and I saw that, like, how it affected their families, how it affected their lives, how and I kind of had that, I wanted to put it in that book because it really affects the whole
mm,
family, and it affects your relationship with your child, your spouse. Um, and that dysfunctional that dysfunctional relationship between Sarah and her mother, it like my mom and I, we are good, you know, we don't have problems, but that kind of, that is taken from my own family, like crumbles of, like, for example, the alcoholism comes from um again a few members of my family, and also the way that they didn't really speak or click, comes from my father and his mother. They never, you know, they were never on the same page, and they didn't have a functioning good relationship. um so that was kind of the, I guess it was like observing the people around me, and how much it takes away from you when you don't have a parent behind you. Like, I think with my own father I saw that, like, you know, it is kind of heartbreaking um to basically see your mom don't care about having a good
Yeah.
relationship with you, if you know what I mean. Like, that, I think that was my inspiration. But if I told you that I don't understand
Mm.
what it means, I've tried to write it, I hope it works. um but that kind of came from observing the people around
Mm.
me. um and I think in one place in the book, one of the characters says families are
Mm.
minefields. And I think that's so true, because you are so vulnerable. You basically walk in the family with bare feet,
Mm.
and you don't know, like, you can always step on a mine and blow up, because you are vulnerable with your family and you don't expect harm from them
Yeah.
naturally. But they can harm you, they can injure you. Like, that's what I wanted to put into this book, because I feel like, yes, families are amazing, but they can be horrible
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
you know.
It's very true. And we see that throughout the book that this is a very complex family in the sense that they have so much trauma and so many secrets. Um, Sarah's grandfather, Muzaffar, he's not willing to talk about things because it's too difficult for him. And as a result, Sarah is trying to figure things out and jumping to the wrong conclusion about things because she's trying to fill in the gaps but doesn't have all the information, which often happens. And this is why secrets can be so devastating and so difficult, because it leaves other people unsure actually of what's happening, and you can just, your mind can spiral and you can jump to the wrong conclusion. Um, and yeah, and one of the other things that we see is this really difficult relationship between Sarah's mom, Daphne, and her sister, Iris. And we don't realize until, well, I didn't realize anyway, until very close to the end of the book, exactly what had gone on and what had transpired between these two sisters. Because I think sisters are such a powerful bond, and I know you also have a sister, and like,
Yes,
and I love reading about sisters. I have a sister as well, and I
me
I think
too.
it's one of the most wonderful, but also like frustrating relationships out there. um,
Yes,
and yeah, and we see them deal with something that we really hope sisters never find themselves in, this kind of situation. Um, but yeah, what I guess inspired you to have sisters at the core of this trauma and this struggle? Because it is Iris and Daphne, in the modern
mhm,
day Istanbul, but in sort of the history of the curse that we're dealing with, it's also sisters. It seems to be
yes,
transferred down
yeah,
through sisters. So what's all that
yeah.
about?
Well, so again, my family, like, my family thankfully doesn't have a deep trauma
Mhm.
like as in in the book. Um, Obviously, in fiction, you can go above and
Yeah.
beyond. But I grew up between sisters. My mom had sisters and my aunts, you know, in this big, loving, but also a very chaotic family I grew up in. And there was like lots of drama, lots of problems. Um, and I remember as a child, I was looking at them and thinking, what's the big deal? But I also had my father's side. And you know how Muzaffar Sareh's grandfather cannot say
Mm.
the name of his own
Yeah.
daughter. So that is from my own father, like
Mm.
my own father. So I learned that I had another aunt on the paternal side. I think I was 20 years
Mm.
old. I didn't know. I thought my father had only one sister. I didn't know.
Mm.
And one day someone was talking about them and I was like, "Who is
Mm.
that?" Because I've never heard that name before. And they said it's your father's older sister. But I was like, "My father doesn't have an older sister." Yes, he does. It was like some woman in my grandmother's house. And they were like saying to her like, "Don't tell her, her father will be angry," because apparently my father had a sister who in a way misbehaved, and the whole family deleted her. Like the whole family stopped speaking with her. They ignored her existence. And I was shocked. Like literally my jaw dropped because in 20 years of my life I have not heard of this woman. And I it took me like an hour to believe that she was real. They showed me pictures. It was shocking. And all because she didn't want to marry someone her father wanted her to marry, and she just eloped with someone else. And then they kind of, and she was happily married. And but they weren't like, and then it took some years after that. I met with her, and she's an amazing woman. She's so strong. She's one of my, maybe one of the women who affected me at most, like, because she's not very well educated, but she's so strong, and she's so like, I know I want this and I will do this kind of mind.
Mm.
And she kind of like left her own family to be with this man she loves. It's there's so much to, and they made a really good life out of that. Starting, thinking that they started with zero.
Mm.
They are doing very well right now. um so that kind of gave me this idea of like, if my father couldn't say her name, because for my father it was attached to this trauma of losing his sister,
Mm.
because, and then being ashamed because all the neighbors, or the, like, imagine this is like eastern Turkey, and all the neighbors, everybody they know are making them feel ashamed because their daughter ran away with this man. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And I think he was like a 15-year-old boy back then, and he kind of attached her name to this big trauma, and he doesn't want to remember it. He doesn't want to say her name. He doesn't want to think about it. He just wants to forget and move on. So this is kind of what Muzaffar also does, and that's directly taken from. I observed my own father doing that. And that is something men do a lot. Like they kind of shut the trauma in a box and they never think about it
Yeah.
again. They never speak about it again. So I think that's, maybe people can find that a bit over the top, but it is real. My own father did
Mm.
that. I mean, he is now on speaking terms with this
Okay,
sister.
that's good.
They, yeah, we kind of helped it to kind of, like, I was like, "Dad, you can't do that. You have your daughters. You can't ignore your sister."
Yeah.
So we kind of brought them together. It's no longer the case, but it happened. So that kind of inspired me. And also, again, with the sisters, it's from my own aunts. Like, once upon a time, they were really well, and I grew up in this big loving family. But then things happen and they fall apart. They kind of stop speaking with each other. They don't want to remember each other. They are angry to each other because, again, it comes again to the families being minefields. Because once you step on that mine and somebody blows you up, you kind of don't forget that. I think you love your family, but you also have the anger to them when it happens.
Mm.
I think you cannot forgive them as easily as you forgive other
Yeah.
people. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I think so too. I think it's a
Yeah, I
very
hope I was able to answer the
no,
question.
it's a very deep. So I think the relationship between sisters is incredibly complex and multi-layered. And yeah, I mean, I loved reading about it. And I think the other thing that I found really
Thank
interesting about the book was that although it is sort of set in this fantasy element, we have a fantasy element because it's set in modern day Istanbul, but there's a crossover, I guess, with the fantasy world. Um, but the issues that we're dealing with in terms of families and sisters and love and heartbreak and loss, these are not things that are fantastical in any way. These are not imagined, these are not fake. These are very real, very personal, but also very universal concepts and experiences. And just reading the book, I mean, this could have just been like a contemporary novel of a family saga about two sisters and an unfortunate situation regarding a man. Do you know what I mean? Like it could have just been and it would have made a brilliant book. But you obviously have written a fantasy and you have introduced us to the realm of angels and the other side. Um, why, I guess, what drew you to that sort of sphere and that arrangement, not arrangement, but that sort of genre, but also in general, like the world of angels, and yeah, what for you, I guess, what drew you to that?
So, when I started writing this book, first idea stemmed from having the heartbreak as a
Yeah,
curse, because I think it is a curse. When some people have, some people
yeah,
feel heartbreak so prominently, they never forget. Like, you kind of get used to it, but when something makes you remember the heartbreak, you still kind of feel that, even if it's like 20 years ago, you still
yeah.
feel that crack in your heart. And so that brought me to, like, okay, it's going to be a curse. And then I initially had this really mysterious bureau who was like dealing with these curses. And I wasn't sure when I was writing the first draft. I think I had one angel. Um, I can't quite remember right now. But I was like, and then I was writing, and then in the same time, my grandmother was
Mm,
on his deathbed, I guess. On her, sorry, I confuse his and her a lot, because in Turkish, we don't
mm,
have she, her,
mm,
she and he. We don't have the pronouns. Everybody is a they. So I always confuse he and she. Sorry about that. Um, so my grandmother was in her deathbed, and it took her a long time to die, because
mm,
she wasn't terminally ill. Her, like, she was just old, dying from old age. And she didn't want to die. Like, she clung on to the life up until the last minute. It took her, I think took her like 3 years, and my mom and my aunt was looking after her, and they were so drained. In Turkey, we don't have um
mm,
the end of life care isn't as big as here, and normally your family looks after you. You are at home and looked after by your family. And I remember it was like an exhausting time for everyone, because um obviously I'm here, but I was video chatting with them, and my mom was crying. She was
mm,
My grandmother was very religious, and
mm,
she didn't know how to read and write. She was illiterate, and she believed that she was going to go hell. She was convinced that she was going to hell, and she was crying. She was asking us, "What am I going to do? Am I going to go to hell?" I still have her sound in my ears. I can just remember. And because she went to the mosque and she listened to the sermons, um, and um, like, she had abortions when she was younger, because she was
yeah,
unable to look more kids. She cannot look after more kids. She had five, and um,
mm,
her husband was an alcoholic. She couldn't possibly have more children. Um, so I was trying to explain this to her, like, my mom isn't really big on religion, so whatever my mom says was
mm,
discarded by my grandmother. I am religious in a sense. I am Muslim, so I was trying to convince my grandmother, saying, "Look, it's not gonna work like that. I mean, God, if there is a God,
yeah,
He should have mercy. It just cannot be just because there must be a logic. Anything illogical to me is not." I don't think anything that doesn't fit my logic would be true. So I was trying to explain to her, but obviously she wasn't getting it. She wasn't, she was old and she was like so fundamentally
Mm.
made believe in some things. And I was so angry about that because I was like, nobody has the right to make an old woman
Yeah.
scared to bits like that. You know what I mean? Like, and I kind of felt like, and then I started thinking about this afterlife. Maybe I should put more of it, and maybe I should kind of make it a bit silly, a bit funny. So when people read this book,
Mm.
they think maybe after death, it's not all like doom and gloom. It's not because nobody knows, right? The imam who told all these things that abortion will take you hell, whatever, he never went to the other side and came back and said, "Oh yes, it's definitely fire pits," and um, so I'm thinking, I really wanted to kind of make this also, as we spoke,
Mm.
the book has some sad elements in it. There is sadness and trauma, and I thought, why don't I just build this afterlife and make it absurd and funny, and then it will kind of balance the sadness, and it will make it a bit ridiculous, and it
Mhm.
will make people feel good about dying. This is my version. And I believe in afterlife. I definitely believe in afterlife.
Mhm.
And I believe in God, and I just wanted to do it, because I wish I could have read it to my grandmother. I don't know if she would believe it. But yeah, she died thinking she's gonna go to hell, and I'm pretty sure she's
Yeah.
not going there. You know what I mean? I just, I'm sorry, it makes me emotional to talk about her. Um, it's not that we had a really close relationship with her. Obviously, I loved her, but I mean, I didn't have this special relationship with my grandmother. I just felt like she didn't deserve being so
Yeah.
scared in her last days.
That is really difficult. That is really, really difficult because that is not what you want for anybody on their deathbed to be feeling so scared. And especially like as a Muslim and a person of faith, like that's not what I want for myself. That's not what I want for anybody else. Um, and I guess like in some ways, fear is also a testament of faith in some ways because if you believe something so strongly, you also believe in what you potentially think could be an outcome. And I don't think any of us will ever know, or any of us know at all, what the afterlife is going to be like for us. Um, but the other side
Yeah,
of fear
yes,
is
but
hope,
can I?
right? Is although we can hear as
Exactly.
many religious leaders tell us about the wrongs that we are doing and how we will be punished for that, but we can also think about the mercy of God and the goodness of God and the love of God, and understanding that actually forgiveness
Exactly.
in the eyes of God is always bigger than punishment. And sort of understanding that. But I
Exactly.
guess when I guess it depends on your own life and how you come to being able to balance those things. And maybe you can't because maybe the trauma of your past is actually what it is, and it might not just be the fear of like the religious fear, but also maybe just the weight of everything that she's had to go through, and the sort of realization that the decisions that she made maybe were not what she would have wanted to do if her circumstances were different, right? And there is so much
Yeah.
space in religious interpretation, if you like, about the fact that our circumstances can lead us to do things that we would otherwise choose not to do. And in Islam, there's this big thing about how your actions are judged by intention. And what does that really mean? It means that yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. But I also want to say, in terms of Islam, and especially like the one, obviously, every country, every Muslim
Yeah, of
country kind
course.
of does it in their own way. What I realized after I moved to the UK. so I can only comment on Turkish way and some of the things I've observed here in the UK. But I feel like everyone pretends as if Allah
Mm,
belongs only to them, whereas actually I think it belongs to everyone. Allah, God,
yeah.
or whatever you choose to call the Creator. I just don't like when people pretend that God only belongs to them. Like Christians also do that as well. Like it is like I probably belief in it is our DNA. Maybe there is a belief gene, and you have either have it or you don't have it. But I feel like I wrote this book like this because I wanted to tell my own, like, my own version in a way. And I wanted to say to that imam who made my grandmother believe that she's going to hell, like Allah
Yes.
doesn't only belong to you,
Yes.
you don't get to say these things. Um and you sometimes see people speaking, especially in, like, I'm gonna talk in Islamic context because obviously that's my background. I can't speak for other religions, but you sometimes see someone very adamantly um,
Mhm.
defending why shouldn't do this, why you shouldn't do that, and then they will just turn
Mm,
around and do more horrible things, and then I think maybe
yeah.
preaching people is easy, but you know I mean, it's a sensitive subject, but I just wanted to tell, like, writing this book, I just wanted to tell
Hmm?
all the imams, I guess, in Turkey, like, Allah doesn't
Yeah.
only belong to
Yeah.
you,
And I think I really, yeah, like I understand what you mean when you say that. Like, it's one thing having authority because you are learned and you understand scholarship and that's great and that's amazing to be able to guide, but to be able to tell somebody that they're destined for hell or for heaven, um is not actually is not actually anything that anybody can do. There's no qualification that enables you to say, and you can say that in accordance with Islam, this is not good and this is good, or this is bad, or like that's very different. But fundamentally, forgiveness and what happens to all of us is in nobody's hands. Yeah,
exactly, nobody
exactly.
knows, nobody knows,
Yeah.
and this is my version, you
Yeah.
know what I
No,
mean.
it's
Okay.
very, very interesting, a very quirky set of or a very quirky other world that you've created. It is very funny. It's not what one would expect, which is good. And I do think it does give balance because you are dealing with some really strong themes of loss and trauma and suffering and heartbreak, and obviously heartbreak is awful. But and also what I loved about the book was, although there is romance in that, it's a reminder that all kinds of love is important and powerful, and heartbreak can be caused by a whole range of things, and you know in not just romantic love and that, and I appreciated that.
Yes, absolutely. I'm
Yeah,
glad
well,
that you
thank you, and I
enjoyed
have
it.
really enjoyed speaking to you, Ova, so thank you so much for your time today. And
Thank
yeah,
you
I
for
can't wait
having
for
me.
more people to pick up the Book of Heartbreak.
Thank you so much, Samia. It was my pleasure to speak with you today.
I hope you loved listening to this episode and found things that will stay with you. I'd love to hear from you, so please do reach out on social media and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review, as it can really help.